We're up to Dav Zayinom at base, but first, the last three lines on Zayinom and Aleph. Zgufa. Omar Rava. Rava said that Sichech al Gabi Mavu is Yeshlo Lechi. Kshera, we're talking about Shabbos of Sukkot. And we're going to say that the third dofen could be a lechi. And why? Because we're going to apply the principle of migu, that since a lechi is called a mechitza, as far as Shabbos is concerned, therefore it's considered a mechitza as far as Sukkah is concerned. Now, Rav is going to take that principle of migu and apply it to what's called pasei biros. So let's just review the concept of pasei biros. We have a Rishus Harabim, and the pilgrims, the Ole Regel, on the way to Yerushalayim, they need water, and there's a cistern of water, but it's in Rishus Harabim. Now, the problem is that the cistern of water is 10 tefachim deep, which makes the inside of the well into a Rishus HaYochid. How could they draw water from Rishus HaYochid out of the well onto the ground, which is called Rishus Harabim? They would be violating Lachas Hotzah. So the Rabbanan made a takana, and they allowed for pasei biros. Pasei biros means that you set up two pasim, each one is an amma, let's say one this way and one that way, like at a 90-degree angle. Each one is an amma, on four corners surrounding this bar. And that's going to create imaginary mechitzas that go from one of the pasim to the other pasim. Now, as far as Sukkot is concerned, this, if you put schach on top of the pasei biros, that would not constitute a kosher sukkah. So, for example, on a Sunday or a Friday, the whole week long, this would not be a kosher sukkah. However, on Shabbos, since this pasei biros serves as a mechitza, for mechitzas in Shabbos, therefore, it's considered a mechitza dofen as far as Sukkah is concerned. Now, again, keep in mind that really, according to the strict law of Sukkah, you have to have at least two defanos that have the width of, let's say, 7 tefachim. Here, you've got only one amma. That's a lot less than 7 tefachim. So where are your defanos? And the answer is that Rava, once again, is activating the principle of migu, that since it's considered a machitz as far as Shabbos is concerned, therefore it's considered a dofen as far as Sukkah is concerned. Now, the Gemara says, Utsrich. Why does Rav have to tell me two of these dinim? The iashmeinon mavui. If he only applied the halach of mavu, of migu, to be machshir sukkah, in the case of mavui, which means that he added a third mechitza, which was only what? Only a lechi, and it was less than a tefach. Mishum de ika shtei defanos mal yos. At least he started with two very solid mechitzos or defanos, and therefore I can understand migu. Alagabi pasi biros the lekashtei defanos mal yos. You don't have even one dofen, let alone two defanos. Low. We would have thought maybe we cannot apply migu in that case, but you don't have any defanos at all. So I need Rabbi to tell me that if he puts the schach on top of the pasi biros, where there are no defanos at all, since it's a mechitzel in Shabbos, we're going to apply migu, and therefore it's a kosher. Yeshmin and pasi biros. Let Rabbi just tell me one case of pasi biros where there are no mechitzas, and yet apply migu to be machshir the sukkah. And certainly I would apply it in the case of a mavui with a lechi. Mishum deika shem arba defanos, because in the case of pasi biros, since you have pasim on both sides, and in effect on all four sides, then we imagine four mechitzos that completely surround the area. And at each side you have a pas, which is one amma. In the case of mavui, you don't have any surrounding four defanos. All you have is two defanos and a tefach. the leka shem arba defanos, aim low. I would have thought that in this case, we're beyond the bounds of migu. This is already going too far. We cannot apply the principle of migu to be machshu the sukkah. Therefore, Rava found it necessary to tell me even this chiddush, that even in the case we have schach on a mavui, which doesn't have 4 defanos, nevertheless, the sukkah is ksherah. Now the Gemara asks another question. The Iashmin and Hani Tarte. Why couldn't Rava tell me these 2 dinim? Tell me the din of Masechet Hagabi Mavu on Shabbos. Tell me the din of Masechet Hagabi Pasi Biros on Shabbos. Why isn't that enough? And he didn't have to tell me another din that when it's considered a dofen, as far as sukkah is concerned, it's considered a mechitza linyan Shabbos. More answers, because I would have thought that mechamir lekilta, when do we apply migu? That's only if you go from chomer to kil. Once it's a mechitza on Shabbos, like the case of pasi biros, or the case of a lechi, then you're going from a chomer to a kula, and we can consider it as a mechitza as far as sukkah is concerned. But to take that which is in sukkah considered a dofen, and now say it's a valid dofen as far as Shabbos is concerned, right? You have a case where the 3rd dofen is just a tefa. It would not be enough to be machshir on Shabbos. So you're going now, because it's sukkah, we're saying that once we recognize it as a mechitza l'gavi sukkah, we're going to recognize it as a mechitza l'gavi Shabbos. That's going mikilta l'chamir teim alo. Maybe that far migu doesn't go. Tzricha, therefore Rava had to tell me this. The Mishnah says, Chama merubsa mitzilta psula. If you look on the ground and the schach is so thin that you see more sun on the ground than you do shade, then the sukkah is psula. Tana Rabbanu, we learned in the Brisa. The Brisa now records machlokas tanoim about a case of chamsa, meruba, machmas, sichur. V'lo machmas defanos. According to the Tanakama, when we talk about chama merupsa, which means that we disqualify the sukkah because it's too much sun, that's only as far as analyzing and singling out the schach. The schach itself is not giving me enough tzel. But lo machmas stefanos, what if there's enough schach on my sukkah, but the reason why I don't see tzel on the bottom of my sukkah is not because the schach is too thin, but because of the defanos. So the schach itself is kihil chasa, what we call misucheches kihil chasa. The reason why the light of the sun is penetrating and it's bathing the inside of the sukkah is because of the defanos. That's not a psul. I don't care if the defanos are blocking the sun. I have here a note I wanted to share with you in the name of one of the Rishon, Rabbeinu Manoach. He writes that af im hadfanos enon elakonim ha'omdim rechokim ze mize poks mishloshet tfachim gamkein hasukah ksher. We said on Amud Aleph that even if you set up these vertical poles and they're distant one from the other of 2.9, the sukkah is ksher. And the reason for that is because you need a sukkah that would be what we call Teshru Kenta Dura. And it's a yeshiva b'sukkah like you would sit in his bias. So it's Derech Diras Odom Mok Machilasa Lioshiu Psuchim Sham Chalonos Rab. Achlo Timtza Shum Dira Ba'olam Shegago Yeporutz Achetikonos Bo Chamanu. He says it's normal behavior to have it open on the sides, but to have no roof on top, that's not called a base dira. Rabbi Yoshi Omer, he disagrees. Af machmas defanos. Meaning Rabbi Yoshi says it's only considered a sukkah if it's got mostly tzel. And if it's got too much sun, and I don't care why it has too much sun, even if it's because of the defanos, meaning the schach itself would have given me enough tzel, but the The fanos are structured, like we said before, vertical poles and so forth and so on, and therefore the chama, the sunlight is bathing the sukkah. That will passel the sukkah according to Rabbi Yoshia. So the word af here means af psula. It's even possible in the case of chamsa merubsa machmas hadafanos. Omar Rav Yemer Bar Shlamya, Bishmeida Abai, my time in Rav Yoshia. What was the source for Rav Yoshia's kumra? And he concluded that if there's chamsa meruba machmas hadafanos, the sukkah is psula. The Torah says with regard to building the Mishkan in Shmos Perek Mem, Bisakosa al ha'aron es ha'paroches. That after we put the aron, which is located in the Kodesh Kodashim, we put a paroches as a mechitza to separate the Kodesh Kodashim from the Heichal, from the Kodesh. And the pasuk says that paroches is misocheches al ha'aron. It covers the aron, and it's called schach. Now, what is this paroches? This paroches is made its primary function is to separate between Kodesh Kodashim and Kodesh. So it's paroches mechitza. You see that even a mechitza is considered schach. It's called schach. Alma mechitzas kischach be'inon. So we say that the defanos of a sukkah, the mechitzas of a sukkah, are called schach. And therefore, what it means is that there shouldn't be chamsa merubsa mitzelsa, too much sunlight coming in as a result of the delphin, which is now being called schach. And since hahu the nechuf beipurta, the mechsek is schach. But since the paroches curves or bends over the aron, therefore it's considered as if it's mechsek is schach. It looks like schach. Amar Abaye, Rebbe, Rabbi Yoshia, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Beit Shammai, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Cherim, Kulam, Svirulu, Succa, Diras, Keva, Be'inon. Now, each one of these Tanon that we're going to learn about is going to paskin and rule on a sukkah and disqualify a sukkah because of this fundamental principle called Succas, Diras, Keva. We need that the sukkah be a permanent dwelling. Keep in mind that we're not saying that each one of these shitos are saying the identical thing. There's no absolute unanimous opinion on any one of these different psukim, but all these psukim are predicated on the requirement that a sukkah be a diras keva. And now we go through each one of these shitos. Rebbe, Bisanya, Rebbe Yomi, Kol Sukkah Shem Ba Arba Amas Al Arba Amas Psula. And we had a Gemara back on Daf Gimel that a bias has to have Arba Al Arba Amos. Otherwise, it's not called a bias, not for mezuzah and not for beis hamanuga, etc., etc. So we see clearly that Rebbe holds that sukkah has to be a bias. Rabbi Oshia, Hadam Mara. We just had Rabbi Oshia, who equated a sukkah with a bias, and he said that if there's chamsa merubsa mitzelsa, there's too much sunlight, even if it's a result of the fanos, which is really part of the bias, it's a sukkah psula. So we see that Rabbi Oshia requires a diras keva. Rabbi Yehuda, Tisnan, Sukkah shigavol amala me'esrim amma psula. If it's above 20 amma, it's disqualified. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Now, why is Rabbi Yehuda say that even if the skach is so high, it's above 20 amma, the sukkah is kshera? And the answer is because diras keva. And even if you'll tell me, according to Chacham, for example, that the sukkah is disqualified because it's too much of a diras keva, that doesn't faze Rabbi Yehuda. He wants a diras keva. Rabbi Shimon, the Sanya, Shtayim Kilchasam, the Tanakama holds that all you need is 2 full mechitzos, ushlishes afilu tefach. Rabbi Shimon Omer, no, that's not a diras keva. Shalosh Kilchasam, we need at least 3 defanos that surround the area of the sukkah. Revius and the 4th dofen afilu tefach. And if you remember, we had Rav Masna back on the Vov that the reasoning for Rav Shimon requiring 3 defanos is because if the Allah Moshe Sinai tells me about one of the defanos that it is a tefa, then we need that 4th dofen, but we need 3 defanos. Means the sukkah has to protect those who sit in the sukkah from rainwater that comes in and all sorts of different air, stormy air. So he has to be surrounded on at least three sides, and on the fourth side by a tefach. Why? Because we need that the sukkah be like a bias. It's got to be a diras kever. Gamliel desanya osa sukkah barosh hagola o barosh hasfina. If you set up a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat, Gamliel post, he says that the sukkah is psula because that's not a diras keva as it moves through the sea or it's carried by the wagon, by the horses. Rabbi Akiva doesn't require that the sukkah be a diras keva. And if I'm not mistaken, we paskin like Rabbi Akiva. So those are the Lubavitcher sukkahs on the back of a Lubavitcher tank. But Rabbi Gamliel apparently would not be happy with such a movable sukkah. Beit Shammai, how do we know that Beit Shammai requires a diras keva? This time we learned to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Ches, Vishaya Rosha. Veruba b'sukkah, v'shulchana b'socha b'ais Beit Shammai posted mesumat shirin. Beit Shammai says unless you can put your shulchan inside the sukkah, then it's not a sukkah kshera because Beit Shammai requires a diras keva. And a diras keva means that you have a place to eat, you have a table to eat on. So according to Beit Shammai, it's not enough that you have a sukkah that's 7 tefachim. You need a little bit more than that. No, I'm sorry, just 1 second. I'm sorry. Beis Hill hold that all you need is 6 tefachim. Why? Because 6 tefachim is enough for Rosha over Ruba. And Beit Shammai add a 7th tefach, and that 7th tefach is for the shulchan. Again, I can't even begin to imagine a shulchan that's only 1 tefach, but it's like a dollhouse. But be that as it may, we see that Beit Shammai requires a sukkah to be a diras keva. And again, as I emphasized before, this doesn't mean that Rebbe who requires a dalet al dalet is going to agree, Arba Amos is going to agree with Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai is talking about 7 tefachim, and Rebbe requires 4 amos. Or, for example, we said that Rav Yoshia requires, chamsa passes chamsa even from the tfanos, and it has nothing to do really with the shita Beit Shammai. So none of these shitas really overlap in a sense, but they all emanate from one fundamental principle and premise, and that is that a sukkah has to be a diras keva. Rabbi Eliezer, how do you see in the Rav? Let's disnan. We have a Mishnah later on Yutes. Sukkah so kimin tzrif. And once again, you have a good picture of it here in the Gemara. It's sort of like a teepee. It's a tzrif. It's something that the bird capturers, the trappers used to use in order to trap birds. Anyway, it's made in a way that it's wide on the bottom, but the walls of this tzrif curve. That's called shipua in Hebrew. They curve towards the top, and they reach each other on top. Nifkashim haksolim. It has no roof whatsoever. And according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to see it's possible. Oh, shesmacha lekosa. He has these very long poles, which he tips over towards the wall of his house. Again, I have a very fine illustration. Now that sukkah has no roof at all. Rabbi Eliezer posa lefisha ein lo gag. So in both cases of a tzrif and a samcha lekosel, we don't have a roof. That's not called a proper dira. Sukkah has to be a re'uya l'diras keva, and you would never live on a permanent basis without a roof. Yeah. What was that famous song, A Door with a Roof? How did it go? Anyway, it was very, very popular. Chachamim say, I don't need a sukkah to be a diras keva. And finally, acherim, where do they require a diras keva? The Sanya, we learned in the Bryce, acherim omrim, sukkah asuya kishovach psula, lefisha ein la Zavios. And now we have a Succa Asuya Ki Shovach. And that means Migdal Agol. And they used to use this as a coop for doves. And it's a round shaped sukkah. And it doesn't have any corners. And that's not usually the way you make a diras keva, without corners. Every diras keva has corners. You put a chair in this corner and table here, and so forth and so on. Rabbi Yochanan, sukkah or asuya kikivshan. And again, this is a case of a round sukkah, and it would seem that Rabbi Yochanan holds that kivshan, which is a chafira shesarfen ba avonim l'sid. So they dig in order to heat up different kinds of dirt and to make sid. What's the word in English for sid? Plaster, right? Plaster. And now what we're saying is that this chafira is made in a round shape. And Rabbi Yochanan wants to know what's the minimum size of a round sukkah. We have to have it so large that 24 people could sit inside the sukkah and then share it. And each person needs one amma. So if you're putting in 24 amma, 24 people around the inside of the sukkah, then you have to have a circumference of 24 amma. But if you cannot put 24 people, psula. So Gemara says, "Keman kirevi the Omar kol sukkah she'ein ba arba amos psula." So if you have a round sukkah and you want to guarantee that it has a square inside the sukkah of 4 by 4 amos, in order to fulfill Rebbe Shiti, that Rebbe is the largest shear of a sukkah, then you need that its hekef be able to seat 24 people, which means that's 24 amos. And the Gemara now is going to attack this because this ratio of 4 to 24 makes no sense. The Gemara asks, Michti Gavra B'Yamsa Yosef, a human being sits in an amma, well, he needs a width of an amma, and Kol Sheyesh B'Kefot Shlosha Tfachim Yesh Bo Rochav Tefach. If you have a circle that has circumference of 3 tfachim, then you know that it has a, what's called a diameter in English? Yeah. Is that what's called, that line that goes straight across? Yeah. So it's going to have a diameter of 1 tefach. In other words, the ratio between the diameter and the hekef is 1 to 3. And if that be the case, then take 12 amos divided by 3, and you'll end up with 4. So all you have to have is enough room for 12 people to sit around in the sukkah. Why? Because that'll guarantee you the 4 amos of a diameter. Because the ratio between the diameter and the circumference is 1 to 3. So why does Rabbi Yochanan jump from Rebbe Shita 4 amos all the way to 24 amos? Meaning each amma for one person, 24 people, is 24 amos. The mathematics just doesn't make any sense. And the Gemara answers, again, this we'll cover tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, Hani Mili, that which we said that a hekef of 3 tfachim requires a rokav of 1 tefach, and the ratio is 1 to 3, that's only be'igul, that's only in a circle. Amal beribua, once you want to cut out a square in the middle of a circle, boit fei, and then you need a larger hekef, much more than 3 tfachim, in order to have an eagle that will have a diameter of 1 tefach. That's not going to be enough in order to cut out, because once you cut out a square inside of a circle, you're going to leave out pieces on each of the 4 corners. And therefore, you need a larger shear. And the shear of a sukkah has to be, in order to get a shetach, an area that has a width and a length of 4 amos, it requires a hekef, a circumference around the eagle, around the circle, of 24 amos. And the Gemara is going to analyze the arithmetic, geometric calculations more tomorrow in Mir session. We'll get to that. We'll get to that tomorrow.